Hey guys, right now on the flip side, we have a special Thrive edition with the Andrew Stanley, Curt Harlow, Chris Brown. This is going to be good. Hey guys, welcome to the show. I got two really good friends that are hanging out with us today. This is my buddy Curt Harlow that's hanging out with us in the studio, and this is the Andy Stanley. Yes, you may have heard it before. We'll get to that in a second. But I just wanted to bring these guys in, just like we do on a daily, weekly basis, and just talk to them about leadership. And you know what? I'm going to do something a little different than I normally do with this show. I'm going to allow you to just kind of lead it for us. Could you do that?
I will lead it for
That would be cool.
Hey, everyone. Pastor Curt. By the way, did you get confused there? I was in San Diego one time. This gal comes up to me. I think I told you the story last
My
night.
wife, probably.
And she's almost in tears, Andrew. And she goes, I don't want to interrupt your family. It looks like you're having a fun family day. We're at Balboa Park. She goes, I just want to tell you, you changed my life. You changed my life. I was like, that's so encouraging. I was like, where did I change your life at? At Hume Lake. And I was like, I've never spoken at Hume Lake. You mean my friend Chris Brown? You're not Chris Brown? No, I'm...
That was the best I ever looked that day.
Yeah.
That day.
So, hey, as Chris said, we got Chris Brown here. We got Andrew Stanley, and yes, that Andy Stanley's son. You're the oldest of the Stanley?
I'm the oldest.
The children, awesome.
Happy to be here at Thrive Conference. I love nepotism. So
Yes,
it's perfect.
It's one of your gifts.
All the perks.
So what we're doing is our special Thrive edition of the Flip Side, where we're just strip mining all the leadership and fun out of Thrive and putting it here on the podcast. And I'm going to start with you, Chris. You're a Bayside favorite, and just say, would you give us a recap for those who didn't make it to Thrive Southwest?
How dare you?
Yeah, see. What did you speak on? What did you want us to all hear here?
To boil it down, I just talked on how not to avoid the sin, but how to avoid being stupid. I just think we failed. And a lot of leadership, even for me, people go, avoid the sin. But no one taught me how to avoid the stupid. And as you know, for me, that's going to be a full-time job. Like, I got a PhD in stupid. And so we looked at the life of Samson and just saw how this guy kept running in the enemy's territory, how he kept just doing stupid. And I even look at his life and go, it may not be a sin, but man, it was stupid. And so much of leadership today, you hear stories about what's going on and people train wreck in their ministry. And it was become one of my favorite lines with our staff to go, man, I don't know if it was a sin, but it was stupid.
Right.
And unfortunately, we live in a day and age where it's not just the act that can take away your leadership, it's the accusation. And we put ourselves in a place where the accusation kills us.
No, say that again, because they're driving and doing dishes and found time, and they need that phrase.
I assume that when I'm on here, they're all have paused their life and are taking notes in a meditation.
They've pulled over.
Yeah.
Most of them are eating a fish fillet, Chris.
If you and they're trying to turn it off, but both hands have got that sauce on it, and they're like, dang it,
exactly.
it's Chris. Yeah, it's not the act of sin that destroys our ministry, it's the accusation. And there's so much of that in leadership today, and you hear story after story, and I go, man, I don't know if it was a sin or not, but here's what I know, they were stupid. They were just stupid. And part of it's because we've equated giftedness with spirituality. And we've taken God's patience with us as him condoning sin in our life. So we let stupid go on until one day it kills us. So that's what I was trying to get out at Thrive.
That's great. It's phenomenal. And I'm really convicted now and a little bit lack of words. I got a major stupid problem in my
Stop
life.
being stupid, Christians.
Speaking of stupid, you were homeschooled.
How's that segue?
I am very dumb. But it's not my fault.
You do.
So.
I mean, I just want to tell you, if you haven't heard Andrew, he's genius, he's brilliant. And I'm a big critic of comedy. I think it's a really hard thing to do, and not everyone makes me laugh. I was dying at your stuff, Andrew. You talk a lot about homeschooling, and I thought I'd heard every homeschool joke before this, but you're killing me, man.
Oh wow, yeah.
That's good.
I talk a lot about my parents' mistake of homeschooling us. But it's funny, I make a lot of jokes about it, but at the end of the day, I get to meet so many homeschool families afterwards, and I've realized how much it's blowing up.
Right.
There's so many homeschoolers, so if I can brand myself as homeschool comedian, I might have a future. I'm selling out. I'm only doing homeschool
in a
jokes.
market.
But yeah, it's fun, but homeschoolers were weird. I would talk a lot about in Atlanta, we had homeschool day at Six Flags, where it was just all homeschoolers in Six Flags. It's like going to the theme park and the zoo at the same time. All the kids are wearing their clothes that they made, and you don't really have to write very many punchlines. You just have to observe.
Just describe.
I forget which comedian said it, but it's just observe and report, and it kind of writes itself. So, but I've had a ton of fun doing stand-up. I started about 3 years ago. I started in the comedy clubs, where I was really the only clean comedian on the lineup a lot of times, and I still do that when I'm home. Try to be a light in a dark place, and then I can come to church and be the darkness in a light place. So awesome. It's fun.
Where did that start? I mean, there's
question.
a lot of people that
Great
are funny.
question.
Kurt's a funny guy.
Oh,
I'm a
wait,
funny guy.
I got to
Yeah.
pause. I got so excited about you guys being here and your takeover of the show. We didn't bring the coffee in. Miss Haley's waiting. The coffee's getting cold.
I'm good.
He doesn't need some.
I don't have
need some.
coffee.
What are you
We're
using?
not going to tell you what.
How did it
I'm
start?
drinking some good stuff.
Don't pause this. Hey, this is a good time to share and like and comment, but we're going to come right back to how did Andrew start
Yes.
as soon as I get some of this.
All right.
Go. This
Thank
is
you.
from some Stumptown Founders Blend. Stumptown's out of Portland, Oregon. And the blend is from Central America. They don't really say which countries, but it's going to be cocoa-y and with a little vanilla. So enjoy.
We're going. We went Africa for the last 5, but we're going. Good for you.
So you guys actually in every show to talk about what coffee,
is this
where it's
like-
from, and what.
The flavor notes. There's an ongoing debate between African coffees and Central American coffees. I think Haley's winning me over, slowly but surely. But I like the African because it's like a couple steps below meth in its caffeine level, and I want to be at the level where a tooth is falling out.
I guess here's what I'm wondering. Do any of your viewers care? I guess that's what I'm wondering. Is there really debate out there? Is your church split happening? Is this a thing?
Go look at the likes and follows, bro.
Really? People talk more about the coffee than the
All the
content?
comments are about the coffee.
Christian
good.
crack.
Recommendations.
All right, back to something you do want to know about. So there's a lot of funny people in the
How
world.
did you start?
Kurt's one of them.
How did you start going? I want to try this stand-up thing.
Oh man, I did not want to. I didn't want to at all. I thought I would be good at comedy writing, and I started emailing with this guy that does comedy writing, and he said he would only help me if I tried stand-up first. So I said, I'll just find someone else to help me with comedy writing then, because I'm not interested in getting on stage. And people ask me my whole life, coming from background of pastors,
Right.
you a good public speaker, you're going to be a preacher. And I always said, no, I hated being on stage. But I started trying it and kind of fell in love with it. And I was just doing comedy clubs and wasn't really telling anyone. I didn't want anybody to come see me. And it started to get fun, and I started to make people laugh and kind of spiraled out of control.
Were you using a fake name? You had a stage name.
No, I
you
used
can't
my
go
real
in
name.
Atlanta as Andy
But
Stanley,
at
can you?
at the Laughing Skull Lounge, where you walk past statues of genitalia to get to the stage, there's not a lot of North Point people in there.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, actually, yeah. My granddad was always like, "Can I come see you at the comedy club?" And I said, I don't think you should be seen there. I don't think you should.
That don't work.
So
I'll
no,
come
but
to you.
this is interesting to me. You didn't want to get on stage, and not because your dad's on stage and your grandfather's on stage. What's interesting to me about that is your timing is fantastic, Andrew. And so was that a natural thing? Because I mean, the way you set up the punchline, you do a really clever thing where we think it's the punchline, we think it's the punchline, we think it's the punchline. No, here's the real punchline, and it's a punch to the solar plexus when you do it. Is that natural? Did you work on that, or?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think a lot of it is learned. You learn from
Yep.
watching other comedians, and
Sure.
there are actual techniques you can kind of study and try to
Right,
apply
right.
to topics. But I always tell people, I think that growing up in church and attending church as a kid is the best way to set yourself up to be a good communicator later in life, because you're seeing good things and bad things, and whether you realize it or not, you're learning what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
And when a transition is bad and ruins everything. And
Right.
so I think growing up in church is the easiest way to get exposed to public speaking regularly growing up. So as a preacher's kid, I kind of had a double dose of that. So I think that just kind of absorbing that growing up helped me a lot when I started doing comedy.
So you take some risks talking about your father and grandfather, especially. How do you figure out where that? And I think you do it exactly right, and it's very funny. You own it. You don't avoid it, and it humanizes them, obviously. But tell me about your thinking on that. Did you ever kind of say maybe I shouldn't do that, or tempted to go even further?
Did they have to sign off on it
Sure,
before you
you're
did
right.
one? So
Yeah, it's First of all, when I started doing comedy, my intention was never to do church comedy or
Sure.
to talk about my dad or my granddad. But it got to where I was getting booked at a lot of churches to do like volunteer appreciation nights, and they would be excited. They can't wait to hear your jokes about your dad.
Right.
And I'd be like, I guess I should write some jokes about my dad. So that's kind of where that came from. So
Right.
I normally, if people don't know or care who they are, then I will just skip it. And if
Right.
I can tell that they want me to, then I will. But when you asked the question about how to know what's over the line,
Right.
kind of the general rule in comedy is if the person or group that you're making fun of is in the room or not in the room, if you would tell the joke when they're, let me start over. If you wouldn't tell the joke if they were in the room, then you shouldn't ever tell
That's
it.
a great rule.
So if my granddad's
By
in
the
the
way,
room,
that's a great rule for preachers.
it's probably a great room for speaking in general.
Yeah.
I think that's a great rule just for life.
Yeah.
Do you have rules about how you speak about your family when you're preaching?
Just don't.
Yeah.
Ask for
Oh
forgiveness.
my
not
gosh, you
permission.
took away 60% of my ministry.
Yeah.
My kids
So
should
here's
be on
what
the
I did
payroll.
early on. Early on, when I used, when the kids were real small, like I'm talking like elementary, if I used a story of theirs in a message, I always ask permission. And if I used a story, we'd go to Toys R Us and buy a cheap little toy. As they moved more into late elementary, junior high, and high school, it was $20.
Yeah,
So
Ray
if-
has that same rule.
Yeah,
We did not have that
rule.
rule in my house.
Yeah?
No.
That's great.
Now there has been times where I said, "Man, this is perfect." Actually, I caught something on film on my phone, and I tried to say I would use it, and both kids involved because it was a family fight. I said no, and I said, "Dude, $20." No, they actually got that price up quite high, and it was worth it for me just for the point in the message. So my rule's always been they got to know ahead of time, sign off on it, and make it somewhat
That's a good
of a
rule.
reward.
The wasabi, if you haven't heard the wasabi story, you got to hear that story. I have two rules, and it really confuses people. Rule number one is if I use an illustration with a family member, my wife, even friends, brother, sister, mom, dad, they have to be the hero of the story, not the butt of that story. So I don't, like sometimes I'll talk about my relationship with my father, but even that, which was not a good relationship, I will talk in a almost third-person language. This is what happens in fathering when families are broken. I want to be honoring. And then my other one is I have a 5-year rule with my kids. So if it happened last week, it's not going into this week's sermon. So when people meet my kids, they always go, they're so old.
Yeah.
Because all the stories are mined from a different season back then. And that seems to work. They like it. They actually are like, hey, Dad. Because we talk, they help me develop the sermons. They're always at the table going, hey, Dad, remember that time I did that? It was so cool. People should know that.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me ask you two guys, two of the most creative guys I know. Andrew, we just met. So that was probably me just trying to suck up to you right
That's
there.
okay.
But
He doesn't
you
know a lot of
seem
creative
like one of the
people.
creative
Yeah, I'm
people.
so sorry that you don't
Chris,
know
you
more
really
people.
are one of the most creative people I know. Talk about how you actually put intensity, humor, all those creative elements. I've seen you destroy flat screen TVs on stage. How do you? What's the creative process like for you guys?
For me, I'm definitely still figuring it out. In terms of writing, I'm always trying to look at things that are happening through the lens of how can I turn this into material.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I think of a punchline or a thing I want to talk about, I'll immediately try to type it in my phone because I know as writers, you guys know, you'll be like, oh, I'll remember that. And then the next day you're like, I knew I was supposed to remember something, but it's gone.
It vanished into the ethos.
So you wake up
yeah.
in the middle of the night. I think Mitch Hedberg actually had a thing. He's a comedian, if you don't know. And I think he said he spends a lot of nights in bed trying to convince himself something's not funny enough to get up and write down. Because he knows, if I can convince myself that this isn't funny, then I won't have to go write it down. But if it is funny, my rule is that I have to go write it down.
Right.
So for me, it's kind of doing that and then visiting it another time when I have more time to focus and kind of write out something that I want to do specifically. Kind of go back to that list.
Awesome.
I think creativity is a unique. First of all, there's a gift. Some people are just gifted and are more creative than others, but it is a unique gift. Almost every other gift you can do. Like you got a singing gift, sing. You can sing. You got a serving gift, you can go serve. You got a leadership gift, well, how to lead. Creativity is different. You don't just go be creative.
Right.
And creativity always needs a problem to be solved. That's when creativity comes out.
Right.
Creativity on its own doesn't go, oh, I'm just going to be creative with this. What you constantly do, like you look at everything through where's the punchline. So he creates a problem with the situation. And the problem is not just see it where it lies, but where's the punchline? Where's the irony? Where's the satire? Messages and teaching is the same way. I always encourage people that want to be creative with their messages. Creativity comes at the very end of the process, not the beginning.
Yes.
Because I get high school pastors, young pastors coming up to me all the time and going, man, I got this great illustration. I'm looking for a passage to go with it. And I'm like, pass. I don't want anything to do with that.
Backwards.
Right.
But then here's why most pastors don't have a lot of creativity in their message. When they've done with their message, they've done their study, they've done their commentaries, they've done their exegetical work on it, they've got a good outline. By the time they're done, they've got a good message. And if you have a good message, you will never be creative with it because creativity needs a problem. And your message right now, you don't have a problem with your message. So now I step back and I go, okay, this is what I'm saying about faith. How can I hold it in my hand? I've created a problem. Right. This is what my main point is. How can I put that on a table? This is what I'm talking about. This is what they're hearing. How can I show it to them?
Yeah.
Now creativity jumps in and goes, oh, you've given me a problem to solve.
Right.
I can start spinning on it.
I like that. I think of it as a three-step process. I go, and it's study produces creativity. Creativity does not inspire you to go study. So I go, if I can't be creative, if I'm having a hard time coming up with illustrations and emotional word pictures, I haven't done my job in study. And I'll literally go, oh, that's a warning sign. I gotta go back. The passage is not in me. I don't grasp the main point of the passage enough. But the second thing that I say is, once you actually have study, I have to reduce it. I'll have like 5 billion thoughts about what's happening in Ephesians chapter 4. I got to go, it's like a gravy to me. It's like a sauce. I got to get it down. And sometimes I'll literally write it in phrases and going, is that phrase minimizing the passage too much and we're losing something? Is this one too complicated? And I'm not talking about anything that those phrases might not never even make into the sermon. They're just me going, I have to get this down for my stupid, simple brain. Then the third thought I have is, does the illustration serve that point or does the point serve that illustration? And whenever the point serves the illustration, it's not good. It's not good. I go, I need something that will make, at the end of this story, joke, whatever, it'll make that truth the star, not the illustration. And I find when I flip it in that thought, man, just all of a sudden, it'll unlock that secret door of writer's block or whatever, and I'll start going, oh, this is what would serve that. This is what would elevate that. And when I do it in the opposite, I'm going, God, did I tell that one? And how many times have I told that? That one works. And if I'm in that one works, we're toast.
That's the downside of the power of creativity is the negative if you're communicating a message or if you're in the gospel of truth. Because people will always remember the story or the illustration, not the point.
Yes.
And that's what caused me some 26 years ago to abandon my stories, my illustrations, and go, how do I make the text the story? That way, when they remember my story, they're remembering the text. They're not remembering me growing up in El Paso, a story about a rattlesnake or shotgun or motorcycles or three brothers, and they did. And I spent the first 5 years of ministry, everyone remembered my stories, and they had no clue what it was about. And that's the danger. I mean, what stories can you tell best? Your own. And that's where I've tried to go, okay, so how do I make his story mine? How do you enter the text, live in it, and come out and tell his story, not yours? And so like last night here at Thrive, I had someone come up and just go, oh my gosh, 6 years ago, I was at this place and you did this story about the Israelites and here's what was going on in my life. And he told me the whole opening scene of the story. I'm like, 6 years ago. He still remembers because how vivid the story was, but what he remembers is 1 Samuel 4.
Right.
He remembers text. Where the first 5 years of my ministry, people were coming up going, oh my gosh, 6 years ago, you told the story about this big shark that you and your brother caught and you couldn't get in the boat. And I'm like, I have raised a generation of Chris followers, and I'm supposed to be a T at the end of that word, and I was botching it.
Yeah, you did a phenomenal thing, Chris, where you actually envision the scene of the passage and describe it. And we full confession, we make fun of it all the time at Bayside, in a God-honoring way, because we're like, you have to be like this. And of course, someone will come out and say, it was a dark and stormy night.
Demon possessed. You're mocked by your
No, we are mocked. We do mock.
A wise man once told me, hey, if he's not in the room and you couldn't say it, you probably shouldn't say it at all.
Say it. There you go.
Yeah.
Just get bolder about
you're not
what you
just
can
in
say
the room, you're on the World Wide Web.
I think that came from Andy Stanley. I think he's a pastor or something like that.
You're in the room and we're online, so I think I pretty much passed that test.
There you go.
But
It's all the times it was said when I wasn't in the room. I'm worried.
In And Chris, I love what you said. I just want to go back for a second to creativity comes from having a problem to solve. I think that I'd never heard it put that way, but I will use that in comedy for sure. And I think the other thing that goes along with that is you're going to have a problem to solve no matter what. So if you can control what the problem is,
Yes.
then you're in control of what the solution is going to be. And I imagine for a lot of pastors sometimes, just to put it in that world, is the problem to solve may be, I want to write a great sermon about forgiveness. It's better to have that be the problem than I need to have a sermon tomorrow.
Right.
So if you can get ahead of things and decide where you want to fight your battles, then your creativity will show up in those areas where you are intentionally trying to.
Yeah, we get to call the shots.
Right.
Yeah.
So
but
that's
you can't
helpful
get
to me
5
thinking about
creative
comedy.
people and just go, hey guys, let's be creative, because they're all going to ask on what.
Right,
What do
right.
we do?
Right.
You can get 5 people together and go, let's sing. You can get 5 people together and go, let's serve. It's a different gift. It needs a problem to be solved. You get 5 creative people and go, okay, here's the problem and here's what we need. Boom, they are going to engage. And again, we get to create the problem. Like you said,
define it, and
set
then-
up your
yeah.
own pitch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think you can feed creativity too, though. You set up the problem. That's one way to feed it. The other way is to master the material. The third way is, like oftentimes we will be talking before the camera's rolling on this, and I'll go, "This is the best stuff." We should have the It's something about that free-willing dialogue actually feeds the creativity too. I want to go back to the thing though, because you said something. I say it all the way. I plagiarize you almost every week when we're teaching
That's what I've heard.
homiletics, and it is true. It's so much easier than coming up with my stuff. About most people, when they tell a story, they give you the data points. They start, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And after the second this happened, people are losing them.
Yeah.
You don't give the data points in that narrative order like that. What do you do?
Yeah, you can't tell a story from an outline. You can't tell a story from bullet points. You can use bullet points to tell you where the next scene is going, but that's a completely different thing. You tell a story from being there. The best stories you can tell are your own. Why? You've lived it. You know the sights, the sounds, the emotions, the senses are all engaged with it. And so you can tell the story about our family union. And we rented this rowboat once, and we were halfway across the... Why are you were there? And so that's why I say, don't take a text of Scripture and outline it and then tell it as a story. Enter the text. You and I disagree slightly on this. I say every single verse in the Bible is narrative. It's either written in a narrative genre or there's a story behind the writing. In other words, even the epistles, Paul is
So
sitting...
some aren't actually literally narrative.
No, they are narrative. Paul is sitting in a jail, writing a letter to a church in Philippi that he planted 6 years ago. They don't know if he's dead or not, and it's called Joy. I mean, that is an amazing narrative that story sits in the midst of. Real people, real time, real place. So what I try to do is I take the passage I'm teaching, read it, and then I jump into the different scenes. I sit in the room. Ray talked this week about 4 friends who carried the paralytic. So I'm going to sit inside a crowded house, be listening to Jesus. What was it like to hear the footsteps? What was it like to have pieces of, a mud thatch composite roof coming down inside, a shaft of light that lights up, then seeing feet dangling in? What was it like to stand across the street and see 4 guys going up carrying a paralyzed man, seeing the house and knowing, wait, who first heard about Jesus that stopped and said, what about Pete? It started with someone, what about paralyzed Pete? And grabbed 3 friends. I want to back up and go into the double-wide trailer, 5 blocks down, 2 tracks over, where Pete's laying on a mat in the front room. People come, they bathe him, they feed him. He just lives off of the mercy and grace of others. The day 4 friends came running up and kicked the screen door open and grabbed him and started taking him. I want to follow the scene, so I'm constantly in the text going, where can I see it from here? Where can I see it from here? Where can I sit on this hill? Where can I go in the immediate, the local, the surrounding area? Can I see it through the character or the crowd or the concern? Where do I even put on a filter of what spiritually is happening, what economically is happening, what politically is happening? And inevitably, one of those 9 windows is going to give me into man, I've never seen this before. And then take people in. And I love starting in that story where people don't even know what you're talking about. And then 3 minutes in, they realize, oh my gosh, it's 4 guys in the paralytic. I've heard it my whole life. I've never seen it.
Right.
And then always, no matter where you take the narrative, because especially in teaching with the call on ministry, people going, oh, I've never heard that story, but that's an amazing story. You failed miserably. You have to take the story and go, what does it say? what does it mean for us, and then how to apply it. If you just give people great stories, I just consider that
Yeah,
failure.
I call that the inductive sandwich. So you start off not telling them how to think, inviting them to think. So they come in the scene with you. But then at some point, you go, let's say this clearly.
Yeah.
This is what it means. Now let's say this clearly. This is what we should then do.
Yeah.
And then let's inspire each other to do it. There's the other part of the inductive, and you put that. And in every audience, there's three types of people. There's the people, the second you start your story, they go, oh, I know where he's going. I totally know where he's going. They're the brightest ones.
And usually about 5 minutes in, they're like, oh, I didn't think I was going there. That's
No,
awesome.
no, there's a whole other group that goes, where is he going? Where is he going? And then there's a final group going, I'm just completely lost.
They're going, I have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Why does
And
this
so-
guy teach Bible?
For each one, if you don't actually get the plain part in the middle, and you do a phenomenal job of this, Chris, you're like, go look right at verse 32. Here's what we're saying. The group that goes, I know where he's going, they never get affirmed or confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
The group that's almost there with you doesn't get there with you. And then there's some people, you just need to say it to them. That's the way they learn. You got to just say it to them.
We've lost almost all those people from our church. They go to churches that just preach differently, and
Yeah.
I'm like, go to another church. I'm going to drive you crazy.
not what we're gonna do here.
And you're going to drive me crazy.
So I used to do stand up, never at the level we used to have.
Look at that.
I used to go to college campuses.
Now he tells us.
And I used to find first of all,
Do it. Here's a little bit of Curt Harlow stand-up routine.
I'm not doing my stand up routine right now.
And
Wait. You'd go to college. You'd do colleges.
I go to college just because,
That's
well,
a
see, I
tough
work with
crowd.
university students, and I would come in and do evangelistic things, and they would laugh.
Okay.
So then my campus missionaries got the idea of, we'll do a comedy night, like finals week, whatever, and come in, Curt, and we'll get it set up, and you'll just do comedy as a way to, like a first soft step into getting to know the Christian organization. Way harder than doing, if you show up as a preacher, and you're funny, people go, oh, it's going to be funny. Thank God. Thank God. But if you get a bunch of kids, it's finals week. I took an hour break, and then, like in the Christian world of comedy, there's no alcohol involved, so there's no opening act. Now make
The
me laugh.
secretive kind being
Yes.
drinking out of coffee mugs.
And that's what people don't understand. The level of, because people come to me, I have a sense of humor and I can be somewhat funny. And people go, you gotta try stand up. And I try to explain that. No. When you hear a pastor, your expectations are here. And my funny is here.
Right,
and people
right,
are
right.
like, you ought to do comedy.
Exactly.
When we introduce you as the comedian here.
Totally.
right.
So
Oh, people
Chris,
sitting back going, you better make me laugh.
I would
Yeah.
never get close to the bar that you have to
I
jump.
paid $75 to have
Two
this
drink
3 days
minimum.
of
Yeah, it is. It's
At his
funny.
places,
I
it is
love
2
it.
drink minimum.
You guys know John Acuff?
Yeah.
You ever have him? Okay,
Yeah.
good. He's a best-selling author. He does a lot of conferences and is a big speaker. And he just recently booked a comedy club for one night and did two. It started out did an hour of comedy. I think he did pretty well.
Wow.
But he's one of those guys that's been speaking for a long time and intentionally writing in funny stories. But that's the example I think of when I think of somebody kind of going from this regular speaking
Sure,
world to
totally.
stand up. But it is so different because people have different expectations. And for me going into churches, a lot of times it's people's first time ever seeing stand up, and they have no
Right,
idea what to expect.
right.
So not only do they expect me to be funny,
Christians
they
are
have
like,
no
what?
idea how I'm
People
going to be
deliberately
funny.
laugh in their life. I can't believe that.
Yeah, we're just coming. We're not. There's no altar call at the end or anything. It's like,
It's just supposed to be good.
yeah, it's just supposed to be funny. But I want to hear more about what you do. So how much time would you do? Did you ever try go to open mics or anything?
I've done 20 minutes to an hour and 75 minutes. And
It's amazing.
I did an ongoing gig in Louisiana. It was mostly in college student issues. So, I do dating, I do mating,
Yeah,
relating,
yeah.
all that sort of stuff. Stress, finals week, all that sort of stuff.
And
But-
college students now are the hardest crowd, like you said. One, because they're busy and they're in
Yes.
between things and they're figuring out who they are. But also, they're the most sensitive to any sort of political thing or
very
any
easy
sort
to
of
offend.
anything you touch on any other group outside of the groups you
Yes,
belong to. They get
yes.
very tight and I don't think you.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because I always think young people will be a good crowd, but college students, for some reason, they're kind of in that phase
Yeah.
where they're still trying to figure out what's okay and what's not okay.
And thirdly, as you know, there's been a lot said over the last 2 decades with our digital world being desensitized to violence. You get desensitized to comedy. They've seen so many clips, so
Yes,
much surfing,
yes.
so much stuff daily
Oh, yeah.
that then for you to show up and be funny live, they're like, I saw 70 clips today that were funnier.
Right.
I mean, the cat spun around and fell off the couch, and you're
watching
like,
Jim Gaffigan for 40 minutes before you got here, and
Oh, I'm sorry. So this is probably horrible then. But I will say though that live comedy is different.
Right.
And that's something until I started doing comedy, I had never really seen live comedy. But there is a big difference. But like you said, we're so overwhelmed with all this content that's in our pocket all day that the less people are like, oh, let's go to the comedy club tonight, or let's go see a comedy show, or there's first time hearing a funny joke. They listened to 1,000 that day. So the pressure's on to be great all the time.
You don't have to name a place or a group, but worst comedy experience for you. What happened?
Oh man, there's several interesting ones. I mean,
besides last night.
When I go to here's been
That
awesome.
was
Open mics are always interesting, because you just show up and sign on the list,
Yep.
and you never know if there's going to be an audience or if it's just going to be a bunch of other comedians kind of waiting their turn and not laughing so that they can be the one that got the most laughs. So I've definitely had shows where there's 3 people in the crowd, and it's kind of like, all right, there's not really any stakes, so doing bad here isn't really a big deal. But I did one church. I remember it was in like rural Georgia, and it was very old crowd, probably average 70s, and I did not write my jokes with them in mind. But they were very excited because a lot of them knew who my granddad was. So they were very excited, but they were about to be very disappointed. Like, I remember before the show, this one older lady kept just talking to me about her granddaughter and just really wanted me to,
Right.
She's like, I'm going to connect you guys. Y'all are going to get married. And I was like, thank you so much for thinking of me. But then after the show, she just didn't really bring it up anymore. She was like,
No.
She was like, oh, yeah, maybe. But it's just when people don't really understand what I'm trying to do. One time, I remember I was going to get introduced at a church. It was like a volunteer appreciation night. And the lady that was introducing me, she was going to pray before. And you know how at church a lot of times the closing prayer, the band will kind of creep on stage behind. And then when the prayer's over, magic band on stage. I guess she thought I was going to do that. So she just prayed and then walked off. And I just had to kind of slowly walk out from the wings and just be like, hey, everybody, I'm a comedian, and here's the jokes. And so lots of things like that with no setup, but then also drunk crowds at the clubs.
How do you handle hecklers?
I haven't had anything too bad. There was one show I was on. Thankfully, it wasn't while I was on stage, but a guy walked into the middle of the club and just started peeing on the ground because he was so drunk.
Wow.
And so when that kind of...
Which church was that?
That was
It was communion night.
That was Assembly of God. But it is interesting to see how different comedians handle hecklers differently because...
He just said Assembly of God.
I
don't know.
I'm just kidding.
We're going to have to edit that. That's gone. That's gone. He's a comedian, folks. It's all fun.
There you go.
We would have gotten fired.
But comedians handle hecklers differently. Like, obviously, a lot of times the heckler, either they're very drunk or they think they're helping.
Right.
So you so you don't want to immediately shut someone down because once they understand what they're doing, they'll shut themselves down. So if you kind of give them a gentle kind of put them down and say, hey, this actually isn't helping, you're bothering people or whatever. If it stays up, you kind of have to get a little bit mean. And I'm not the best at that, but it's fun to watch people that are really good at it because they will. They'll destroy
Slice and
someone.
dice.
They'll just make it to where the person just has to leave.
Awesome.
And it's some of the most fun you'll have in a comedy club is watching that happen.
Okay, favorite crowd to be in front of?
Hey,
Quick, I know you're trying to
Chris,
take
Chris,
Yeah.
this is not really helping.
I know.
No.
See how,
Are we out of time?
yeah. 5 minutes ago. That's right.
Oh, cool.
But,
Well, we can cut out
do you
my
know that-
offensive comment then.
No. We're keeping it all in. By the way, your website is?
AndrewStanleyComedy.com.
Andrew Stanley. And really, Andrew, great job at Thrive Southwest. I laughed and laughed, which is, I think the joy of the Lord is our strength. Like, we ought to laugh some more than just laugh because laughter is good with extra laughter sauce. So great job.
I believe it.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Chris Brown, when are we going to see you at Bayside next? We need to get
May.
you on the calendar. In May. You're
Thrive.
coming in May. At Thrive. Okay,
By the way,
great.
it's PastorChrisBrown.com. Thanks for asking.
There you go.
Apparently, one of us has something worth clicking on.
I just figure at Bayside you heard it all before. So.
It's a true story.
Anyway, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you.
Hey, do me a favor. Find someone who needs to laugh. Find someone who's got a presentation at work. Find someone that needs to understand a little bit more about the communication process, or just you liked it because you liked it, and share this Flipside episode right now. Just make a decision right now to share it. Like it. Leave a comment. Keep coming back because we're going to have some amazing guests coming up in the future. You don't want to miss a single one of them. And as always, thank you so much for watching.